Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We are getting started a couple of minutes later. Sorry about that. So can everyone hear Geshe's voice as well as mine? Thumbs up? No, you can't hear Geshe's voice. Okay.
Oh, why don't you say that?
Maybe, I don't think Geshe was
They can? Okay, good. I just saw people kind of saying no, so. Geshe says my glasses are broken. All right.
Listen. Oh, yeah, that's your congratulations.
So firstly, greetings to all Dharma friends, wherever you are. Geshe hopes that you are well and he hopes that you are happy. Yes, Kogidu. Is everyone hearing us okay? We had some issues with the sound previously, just making sure. Okay. Oh, Kogidu.
Oh, yeah. Why a time as the Nichini Taru and so Kibachi, Kibachi, Tenetella, Tenetanije.
So the task that we are engaged in today is to achieve the happiness, not just the happiness of ourselves, but also to be able to contribute to the happiness of the people around us. So we often speak about the mind in absolute terms as being something that is pure and luminous. But when we speak of the character of the mind, we also often say that it is neutral. So this may at first seem like a paradox, but actually, if we think about this a little bit, when we say the mind is neutral, that fits logically because we know that if we familiarize our mind with what is unwholesome, the character of the mind moves in an unwholesome direction. And similarly, when we move the character of the mind in the direction of what is wholesome, it goes to a wholesome direction. So all of us, because of our previous habituation, the mind is more habituated to the side of the afflictions. And because of that habituation to the previous afflictions, that is why we find that our mind more easily goes in the direction of delusion. So we understand that when we speak about the self or the I, in many ways the self or the I is like the servant of the mind. And similarly, because of the factor of habituation then, because of that habituation then, the mind is also servant to the afflictions, and hence the self. So therefore we understand that the mind is something that is always with us, that the mind is something that we are always following. So, although the self necessarily follows the mind and is the servant of the mind, we do have power over our habituation. So, if we habituate ourselves to what is wholesome, to what is positive, we can stop being the servant of the afflictions and direct the mind to a more wholesome direction.
다 대백에 릴러보면 되와 세ሾ마도 이지기 쇼는 다 가지 대백 때도 가서 대도 요할 때니나 템보대야 될거 공바 또다지 매나 로토고 매에서 당간서 로조체야 이너를 공자야 이너를 감각을 하레스.
So we see that when we bring forth wholesome qualities like love and compassion in the mind, we may be able to bring them forth for a short period of time or get a little feeling for them, but they don't last. This is because of our lack of habituation, and it is through our study and practice of the teachings that we can habituate the mind to what is positive and establish that good direction.
어다 드리지 이살 내가 가 첨보 내가 첨보 어다 들어가서 내가 말했어 내가 첨보했어.
So we understand that the task that we are engaging in today, it is not any ordinary task. In fact, it is a very positive and vast, meaningful task.
어다 될더니 다 가지 들 리도 셀 헬레지네 다 내가 지게야지 하이상게는 간서 어다 리도 셀 루바스 전에 다 헬레지네 이스.
And in order to be able to engage in this task successfully, we need our body and mind to be relaxed and malleable. So let us take a moment to just set the body and mind in a peaceful state.
리토나 자토 리토다 리토스나 다 토가가 야포도 야르네 올레레시 세요레시 참레스.
When the body is upright and straight, then the channels are upright and straight. When the channels are upright, then the prana, the winds, can move easily. And then the mind can flow.
대용 세 리바다와 이제도 야 세미타 세자도 다 같이 뭐지 알아서 비던 되지 여보 지네 데리카라고 된다고 지고 잘했어. 다르주가라 소마스 리바다와 이제도 야.
So let the mind be soft like the fleece of a bird or the fleece of a rabbit. We want the mind to be in a soft and comfortable state.
대용은 이가 되는 소나도 그게 생명대로 이쯤마 멜론다고 간가 통토바지.
And this mind that we are working with, when we think about its nature, it is pure and luminous, and it can comprehend any object, just like a mirror can reflect all things.
니비게 선서지 파자 아고 베셔와도다 노토라스 지도 마지 파자 이서.
Make the intention that I will leave aside any thoughts and regrets about the past. I will leave aside any plans and hopes for the future. I'll rest in the present.
절레레 매바지 발레레 지는 데서나 지구 네스카르 예나 통토만 노지 어떻게 시선도 그랬어.
And once we still the mind, it's a little bit like water. When the water is still without waves, we can clearly perceive any objects underneath it.
tendi senchi ngowa doma melo noji kanga rita bachi yuwa isa tani ta te peche chi nela mariba
Because the mind has this potential of pure clarity, because it can reflect what is to be known like a mirror, I will clear my surface of my mind from the dust of ignorance. Once I have removed the dust of ignorance from my own mind, then I will strive with a wish to benefit, to help others clear ignorance from their minds. In order to be able to do this, I request the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Do a short mandala offering. with refuge in bodhicitta.
Sanje Jidon Soge Junam La Jangju Badu Dani Gyasuji Dagi Jinji Nibe Sonangi Jola Penjir Sangi Juba Sho Sanje Jidon Soge Junam La Jangju Badu Dani Gyasuji Dagi Jinji Nibe Sonangi Jola Penjir Sangi Juba Sho Sanje Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jangju Bardu Dani Gyabsuji Dagi Jinyin Gibe Sonangi Jola Penjir Sangi Juba Sho.
Yeah, sorry, I was just wondering if our tile was highlighted, but I can see it is, so we're good to go. Yes.
Yes, ma. Ata ngarusu kanga ani karse kamali no ne mali manda tawa jetu jomba jetsu mali ya pachira ya res.
So within the different types of supreme human rebirths that we have the most exceptional one, the freedom of the human rebirth with all of the freedoms and endowments.
That thing also Pitasi will Tunga Maramata Halea, Kembo, or that Jimbo, Gini Mare, Jepasu, Mombo, Chilatin Shumaches.
And this exceptional human rebirth with the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments is not something that just comes by chance. It of course arises in dependence upon causes. We need to accumulate many exceptional causes to achieve it. So it's almost impossible to achieve such a human rebirth, but today we have this type of human rebirth in our very hands. It is actually through our study of the Dharma that we can come to understand how difficult it is and how profound the causes that we need to amass are to achieve a human life such as this one. And we've often said that in Sukhavati, the land of great bliss, and even amongst the Arya Bodhisattvas, when they look at the humans in this world, they think that this is the most exceptional rebirth for transformation. One of the reasons that a human rebirth is considered so advantageous is because a human being in this realm is able to bring forth an exceptional kind of sharp wisdom that is difficult to bring forth in other realms, even fortunate ones. And it's a little bit strange because the paradox is, it's by seeing all of the problems in this human realm that wisdom can be brought forth. But seeing those difficulties, that is a condition. It is a condition to bring forth a wisdom that is profound and vast. And that is why being a human being in this samsaric realm is considered fortunate. And not only do we have this human rebirth, but currently we also have access to the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha's teachings which lay out step by step the nature of the mind and how to transform. And even modern scientists, when they look at the Buddhist presentation of the nature and the components of the mind, they are very impressed. In other words, we have encountered a teaching that has all the information we need to be able to completely purify our mind. And that is really something extraordinary.
다 강에 강가 매봐서야 돼. 다 놀러니 매봐서 그거 알아봤어.
And we understand that all of our problems may have the appearance of arising from external conditions, and certainly external conditions contribute to them. But we should also understand that ultimately the causes behind those conditions, right, these are deep within the mind. So we have to clear away the faults of the mind.
다 대시 강가지야 강에 강가 매봐서야 돼. 소소소 이는 롱요 반다고 지단다르다. 바디도 어떻게 들을 수 있는 와.
And Chandrakirti says if you want a situation where you can achieve all happiness and completely clear away all suffering, with this current rebirth, you have the freedom to accomplish all of that. Sorry, if people see my head going in different directions from how it usually does, it's because we have guests today, so I'm just getting used to seeing real people and also trying to make sure that I make eye contact with the camera. So my apologies. 민근의 요청으로 삼성 가서 갈라 테스트하고 기대다.
어디서 다 들을 건지
Geshe's like, yeah, you just do it. You don't need to make an announcement.
다 들었는지래. 다 대선도 맞아. 당간서 칠 가게 대실가 대시 대할 가게 쇼마도 이질 가게 다 조보용 뭐뭐지면도 야래.
So now we are gathered all together with an assembly of people who like the Dharma, together with people who have an appreciation for love and compassion. We are all gathered together as Dharma friends.
다 들어서 진에서 소소가 다 보게 된 야내서 야가 가르쳐 그건데 대다야 같이 뭐라마도 용안서 야보도 드리기 영어도 요 말했어. 이나는 다 냐면 센디가 거의 샤왈 뭐거네 뒤 요부 조조사 라이년가시 요치 뭐 요래서.
But we have to be careful, right, to maximize this opportunity. We are not in a situation of the days of old that the text mentioned, like being an indentured servant to a king or something like that. But there are many samsaric activities that we strive in. And it's possible to be completely bewildered, completely immersed only in those samsaric activities and lose opportunities.
나로서 다 야리세나 니바 야보 할래야리 그래서 주바 손지 셈비리 요아레 타베리 요아레 손지리 강가 요아레 대세 발라바지 조시요와스.
And we have all of these potentials within us, the potential to arise bodhicitta, the potential to achieve liberation or moksha, and the potential for enlightenment or the Buddha nature. But at the same time that we have these potentials, we also face obstacles to actualizing those potentials. And those obstacles are 4 in number.
다 예무 발라 건바시 저가 될려고 하면 와서 또 제주대도 되래.
Now, the first one is also the most powerful and the most difficult to address, and that is strong habituation to the afflictions.
다 대에서 릴라가서 넘는데 쭉 냠바도 쳐봤지. 대웅한도 저라요 바시요 말했어.
The second one is a little bit easier to address, and maybe for many of us it doesn't affect us so much, but the second is being under the influence of harmful friends.
다 좋은 냠바 다 좋은 냠바서는 senjel을 다 내바시알 가버더니 가디나 드리다 양만도 통해요 알아왔어. 어떤지도 주포 때문에 쳐서는 가디나 때는 보게 가르쳐 세요 버들 리얼. So
when we say evil friends, we mean perhaps friends who take delight in harming others or who are content to harm others to seek some sort of advantage. And so if we are in the company of people like that, it's going to make it very hard to bring forth positive minds. The third is being under the command of kings and so forth. Being under the command of kings and so forth. Yeah, sorry. So then also we don't face being indentured to kings and so forth in our modern world so much, but we certainly can be the servant. We certainly can be the indentured servant to our samsaric activities if we're always compelled to engage in them.
다 대시고 시고시래 가서 다녀 들으니야니마 드리기니마 내가 아버지 저기 너네 아버지 저기 손을 요바 이나요 쇼게 다시 내가 춘주 드리는 거 거네 우리나 바지 뒤요 말해.
So we can see this, can't we, in our own lives, because we wake up in the morning thinking, I'm really going to make today a practice day. I'm going to do something with Dharma practice, but then one thing and another comes up, and then by the time the evening comes around, we realize that we didn't fulfill that aspiration. So if we look at that particular situation, then whose control are we under? We are under the control of samsaric activities.
that Alay no Kuya go the warrior, the was Chadon as like a chegari in the music like a Momoyar was in and that so she take as a so the opportunity that Ogachimores.
So, of course, we do have to engage in certain types of activities to maintain ourselves and so forth, but mainly we just have to be aware of not being completely immersed only in those.
That Deshi puts it so much.
지바디
That you want to minute to carry into summer.
came into
Yeah, that jet is a Carjabolas vision, but that's I had to acquire the name maybe you can get.
Yes, and the fourth one is not having enough to maintain ourselves, being short on food, shelter, and other necessities of life.
That day jetela, reese, 3 or Sebala, Pachi, she is the Selimiana about us.
And these 4 points, if you can keep them in the mind, it's good. These are known as the 4 factors which hinder the actualization of our positive potential.
Or do it to us, or that the dream tab, Chimomia is that also got what you do, Povach at in the race.
And definitely because they are not so strong within us, then joyfully, right, we can work to reduce their influence.
What and this or this one, or that Tangaro something about that, and maybe got the Tangaro so keyword the ship so much you put in Roa Shabala, tell the law no the Pachi got. Remember the Pachico
And then in order for us to be able to enter and progress along this path which leads to ultimate happiness, we need to bring forth that which allows us to abandon mistaken paths and that which allows us to abandon limited paths. And we can think about this in a worldly example, right? If you want to reach a destination, you don't want to follow a wrong path because you won't be able to get there. And similarly, you want to make sure that the path that you follow has the capacity for the traffic to flow easily so that you don't waste time. So this is the kind of the underlying principle. And on the basis of cultivating these 2, that which allows us to abandon a mistaken path in favor of a correct path, which is refuge, and that which allows us to abandon a limited path in favor of a vast path, which is the practice of bodhicitta, it is on the basis of this that we can activate those potentials and bring forth great merit. And this is a very powerful virtuous mind, and even if we're at home and we only have a very short period of time for practice, if we infuse it with these 2 minds, that becomes something very powerful. And of course, though, when we try to bring forth these virtuous minds, what we'll find in our experience is that sometimes we're hindered. We're hindered by unwholesome or distracting thoughts, right? And so when we are faced with those mistaken minds, with those mental projections, the first step is to put the mind in a relaxed state. So we try to bring forth a mind of happiness and wonderment, like a child who first walks into the temple and just appreciates the temple as a whole, not distinguishing between this or that object, right? Not being too discursive. Think any object that appears within the mind, I'm not going to reify it, to solidify it. I'm just going to see it almost like an entertainment, an entertaining appearance.
tenni me yoba chila ui shilo lowa to nolan rowa ni tila tatsi tenmo chila ui sama.
So now direct the attention to the breath, breathing out, aware you're breathing out. Breathing in, aware you're breathing in.
nunga juwa ji tan nipa chome bari pa shilo lo pando ikari shilo pa to yo sama. nunga juwa ji ane dan lek juwa la so pa ta ane zuma me bari shilo pa to yo sama.
Think any imbalances or contaminations of the elements within my body as I exhale. I breathe away that contamination.
yu zuma la so pa tsinu yo sama.
And as I breathe in, that pure air rejuvenates.
rongi sedo luhe kabi nomba chila rongi ni kara sita.
My mind is in the aspect of a white sphere of light at about the heart level.
Te kale chini ta za zai zon ne ta ba ina wa so to le teni ya yo sama.
And it abides in the center of our central chakra or channel. And you can think of that as being like a hollow pipe.
Pe sa ta jeba to no te tene no kala panjini chome ve sedo no to la so ba ja ya wa ni so sama.
As we recite Pe, we imagine that that sphere of light goes into the sky, and then with Ha, it dissolves. That sphere of light dissolves just like a rainbow into the sky, and with that dissolves any discursive thoughts, stress, grasping.
Se xiong to ke ba kanga lo shine pa le na ko chwa so sama.
All of the laxity and excitement within the mind is cleared away, and it abides in a relaxed, malleable state.
ro no rong da no wa ri chu ke sin ji yo zo la ane so ji sin bi ri so ji ri cha de yo so ba.
Think myself and all sentient beings, we have within us the potential for bodhicitta. We have within us the Buddha nature, the potential for enlightenment.
ri za chen bo cha ba no ji so so nie ye ba te ta ye wa te ni me kanga nie za chi ru ni.
Because I possess that potential and all beings possess that potential, there is not one sentient being who is removed or far away from me. All sentient beings are close to me and cherished by me.
so so la ko ka ha le be ko ka ta de le za che ga ra ya mo de te le sin lo ri chu sin ji yu zo pe ba yo.
Actualizing this potential, it is the supreme kind of opportunity, the best opportunity I could have, and think I will actualize this potential so that all beings can reach that state of Buddhahood.
di che ta sin ji yu zo che ta so ji che ko po to ba sha ge ni so ji se.
In order to help them to reach Buddhahood, I myself will actualize Buddhahood for their sake. Meditate on bodhicitta. In order to be able to actualize this Buddhahood and lead sentient beings there, I will bring forth high quality study and practice. So in this way we've concluded briefly the motivation. So next, having thought all sentient beings, I need to lead them to that state of Buddhahood. In terms of how to achieve that, then this text where we are now, it explains that step by step.
Yes,
So it is said to make your mind like fleece, like soft fleece, like a bird's down or a rabbit's head. When the mind is soft, right, then we can use it in the way that we want. And so this example of the down, this is an example taken from a text by Panchen Losang Chuki Gyaltsen on the Mahamudra. And within this, there are different analogies which are given about how to settle the mind, like the down, like the child resting in a temple, and this helps us to place the mind correctly. So now we will begin the commentary on the King of Prayers. And then Geshe said, yeah, next time everybody bring the text with you. Don't worry, I'll read it in English. You'll follow along, okay. So with that I or that self, if we really wanted to achieve happiness, then the way that we do that is by following the Bodhisattva practices. Huh? Yeah. And if we are able to become a bodhisattva, then we will really have activated the potential of this mind. And a bodhisattva is somebody who is able to maintain a stable happiness of mind all of the time, and who is also able to be a source of happiness to others. And when we work, when we study, when we practice, it is important to bring forth a motivation, and it is important to make prayers. And so where we are in the text, we are in the text which gives a section of 16 important or different prayers.
Lama So
the next one is, we are on number 8, so we're on page 19 for those of you who are following. And the outline of this verse is offering to the Buddhas in person. So Geshe is just explaining that this is almost like a prayer to be able to perceive the Buddhas directly. Because, for example, if we think about His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and when we're able to see them, the happiness that comes forth in the mind, it's a little bit like that.
This one.
And at that point, when we make this prayer and actualize it, anytime we make requests or make offerings, we will be able to perceive the holy beings directly. So there is a point where the Bodhisattva on the path of preparation preparation, he or she achieves the ability to perceive these Buddhas. And it is a particular kind of samadhi or concentration known as the concentration of the Dharma continuum.
다 던지게 띵해서 도차서나 이때 예를 사손지도 쇼니서 가와 요바 이나요. 그로스 지수바 강간 고토요 아레스. 이때 현달라.
And when that concentration is achieved, not only is the Bodhisattva able to perceive those holy beings, but he's able to hear the speech of Buddhas, for example, even Buddhas in other realms.
그래서 와서 어다 드니 용하셔 봐라 이제 뭐 뭐지라 되는 거야 용거 있어 아주 단다 멜로동 되다 가서 듣다 듣기가 지금 여러 왔어.
But of course, achieving such a concentration like that depends on amassing the correct causes, and the beginning of amassing those is making these prayers of aspiration.
어당 아주 뭐지 하고 신주 전부 내가 타마테 가시게 요 말에서는 띵에서 땜보요 기지 거기 여러마도 그래서 전부 쇼알라 그럼 미 통야 메아로 왔어.
So just relating this, we know that, for example, when we talk about the teaching that is the last chapter of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, there were only a few in the audience who had the profound level of concentration to be able to perceive that chapter, because by that time, of course, it is said that Shantideva had ascended, disappeared into the sky, so many could not hear him.
어다 띵에서 짜침보 여기 저기 떠다 거기 요 아이다는 타마타마 되는 지가 왔어.
So those who possess this kind of concentration, this concentration of the Dharma continuum, they were able to hear the entirety of the final chapter of that
다
text.
가디나요 땜보 디양 가서 티 땜바지 땜보 마데나요 사소소 이마다 그때 때에서 고토 같이 다다.
네.
소소소 돈을 땜보 stenela.
Yeah.
근데 이마 디세 요리 따따나 시고 고토로 왔어.
And so as we go through with this explanation, just try to understand what you are able. You might not be able to understand every word in the prayer, but Geshe encourages you to, after the teaching, revisit the prayer. Read it again. Think about it. And what you'll find is that slowly, you comprehend more of the meaning.
어때야 슈로까지 될 손지시지 거인게 원에서 떠다다기 자와 따르 마고가와 건도 뭐셔와 대단하게 제가 자체저.
So we are at the last verse on page 6. May I always directly see the Buddhas, masters encircled by bodhisattvas, and without pause or discouragement for eons to come, may I make extensive offerings to them.
다 손지시도 지바다 가지고야 코코를 소비야 손지를 그저 손지서 먹고 거는 주요 알아봤어. 인에서도 토토토 바쇼 스텔레테 다야도 뭐 때문에 자기도 왔어.
So the Buddhas and their children, actually, the translator does my work for me in this text because it says bodhisattvas. So Geshe is explaining that when we say the Buddhas and their children, we mean the bodhisattvas. But anyways, this is a prayer to be able to directly perceive all of the Buddhas and bodhisattvas in front of us.
다 진이바 되니까 와나 토토바에는 저는 저렇게 내가 가르치긴다고 하지.
And then the next part of the verse explains, having seen those Buddhas and bodhisattvas, then what kind of activity should one engage in?
마고 까와 건도 무셔와 마고 비 까와 디세 몸 가제 손댄다 손지 서서 손마지 바다 까와 몸 디세 로가 이나요. 무셔와 세리 레로가 슈르 세만로와. 이워지는 레트닝아.
So without pause or discouragement for eons to come. Here, the eons to come means from now all the way until one achieves enlightenment, no matter how long it takes. And Geshe is actually translating, giving this word pause as meaning more something like laziness. So without laziness or discouragement for eons to come, making those offerings continuously. So I will engage in this activity without laziness, without discouragement, without drudgery. I will engage in the activity joyfully.
시부터 봐서 수비가 아래라 말어서 수지도 디세 가디이나요 다 마고be 송 마지 바다 말어서 파마도 쳐봐 놓지 두번 쳐봐 놓지 수지도 전에서 봐서 제바 소소
And once we make this aspiration and this prayer, this means from lifetime to lifetime until enlightenment, we will continuously meet with the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, just like we continuously meet with our parents and friends. And so if we tell a little bit of a story related to this, so at the time that the Buddha was abiding in this world, there was a great king who had faith in the Blessed One. And because he was a great king, of course, in those days they did not have cars, so he would ride around in a very magnificent chariot. And so because he had great faith in the Blessed One, whenever he saw the Buddha, he would kind of feel embarrassed and he would want to jump off the chariot because of the chariot's height. Now, of course, jumping off a chariot in those times normally wouldn't have been advisable if we think about all of the potholes, the rocks, and the sharp things on the ground. But because the Blessed One possessed clairvoyance as well as the legs of magical emanation, he was able to make it so that the ground was soft whenever the king would jump. Loso. And then, of course, there came a time the king was still alive in the world, but the Buddha had manifested the parinirvana, the passing away. And at that time, after the Buddha's passing away, there was one who was regarded by many as being kind of like the successor of the Buddha, a great foe destroyer, a Shravaka. And so the king, wanting to continue to respect the teaching, whenever he saw this Shravaka, this foe destroyer, he would want to jump off the chariot. But the foe destroyer said to him, "It's not wise for you to jump off the chariot whenever you see me out of the corner of your eye. Because of clairvoyance, I happened to know that you would be in this place today and was sure it would be in a soft place, but I do not possess those same legs of magical emanation." I can't protect you, and the reason is, unless I make a specific intention to abide my clairvoyance on you solely, it's possible I'll be distracted by other things and that you might hurt yourself. And this is a difference in that clairvoyance, right? A fully enlightened Buddha, because they have completely cleared away ignorance as well as the latencies or the imprints left behind by that ignorance, they can perceive everything with the clairvoyance spontaneously. There's no question of going from one object to another. So we see that there's a great difference between those who have achieved liberation and the state of a foe destroyer vis-a-vis the fully enlightened state of a complete Buddha. So that is the 8th in this set of 16, offering to the Buddhas in person. So now we come to page 6, we come to the first verse on page 7. And this is the 9th in the set of 16. Yeah. And this is retaining the holy Dharma, or like holding the holy Dharma. So we are retaining or holding the holy Dharma in this lifetime, but here we are specifically making the aspiration to be able to hold it for lifetime to come.
자와 노지 돈비 친저지 쇼주셔와 근도 농와 셰 아니 좀보셔와 농바 용아요 망고가와 근도 셰바 저스
May I hold within me the Buddha's genuine Dharma, illuminate everywhere the teachings that awaken, embody the realizations of a bodhisattva, and practice ardently in all future eons.
다면로 쳔버 서dun데니 다티칼런데 시작이야레스
And this is explained with a kind of as holding within that verse 3 important points of prayer.
어다 자와 노지 자와 세네타 디젤리 자이다스 야 디스 손지 뭐야라스
So then when we talk about holding the bit of a difference in how this is translated. Yeah, so when we talk about holding the victor's genuine dharma, see, actually, where it says Buddhas, it should say victors. So holding the victor's genuine dharma, Geshe said, when we say victors or conquerors, we mean the Buddhas of all three times, past, present, and future.
자와 세네 디젤리 자와 또저 테코네 가쇼지레 네오 가르르 자자레 녀모보도 시지드발리 자와
And we say victor over the four maras, or the four demons, and also victor over the two types of obscurations, right? The afflictive obscurations and the wisdom obscurations.
디스와스 어다 자와 노지 돈비치 세 자와스 야 손지 조된데 뭐뭐야라스 거로서 돈비치데 말아서 너 용주 고와등에 속에 누가를 조이 타지이자 드디기 등에
And the genuine Dharma means this genuine or holy Dharma, which is able to free both myself and all sentient beings from samsara in general and the three lower realms in particular. Because it has the power to do that, may I hold this within myself.
돈비치 점바 잘라바이나 돈비치들 니요아레스 룽기치도 두비치 니요아레스
And when we speak about the holy Dharma, remember that we can think of this holy Dharma as having two aspects, the Dharma of scripture and the Dharma of realization.
다 룽기치에서는 가로서다 야 베잘단이 다 로미 코를 로르즈 드리치는 소소 세르버게 여보샤요나 룽기치 점바스리아레스
So when we say the Dharma of scripture, those are the texts or the books that we read, and if we read, contemplate, and maybe recite and try to memorize those, then we are holding that Dharma of scripture.
저때 말했더니나 이제 같이 뭐라와스 노게 또 빠시와라 또 뭐그러 보게 따다지 로주도 드리소니 로카라와스
And of course, the Dharma of scripture is not the main one out of the two, but it is extremely important because if we do not practice what is contained within the scriptures, then we will not be able to bring forth realization.
어다 데네서 그네서 보게 따다 요바지 세야레스 다 데네서 요하라와스
And so when we speak about these Dharma of scripture, we can speak about it in terms of the Tripitaka, right? The three baskets. As I just say in Geshe, maybe some people aren't familiar, so I'll just say what those are. It's the Vinaya, right? The discipline. It's the Sutra, the collected discourses, and it's the Abhidharma. Those are the three baskets.
데네서 용게야 다뭐야 몬치하고 그러와스 라바스 나로스 요다 강가메바서 라바스 때 투셀 총고 요아레스
So why do we need to have three baskets? Because we need three baskets that elucidate the three trainings. We can talk about three trainings that are very important.
저기도 와스 어다래 저기도 당게 약게 좀 호시했어요.
Yeah, sorry, Lama something's a Lama.
수저가 라바스 빼나 나로서 두시 소소는 내가시 시두자 보게 줘보지요나 대매바서 샤발라 리템보치 거기 아레스
So the first of these three higher trainings is the training in ethics. So we talked about how it is necessary to defeat the four maras to be able to bring forth our potential. So we need to therefore restrain our body, maintain our bodily health.
어때 내가 시기도 저 수저가 라바티가 다세 미야 노도 처음에봐 저 처음에봐 파관에 세트 셔와지도 보게 된 뭐야 보지 이거 아레스
And also what we'll find is that when we abide ethically, right? When we abide in moral restraint, there are less disturbing thoughts and activities that are imprinted into the mind, and because of that then the mind can more easily remain still and peaceful.
나로서 세기 보면 뭐지 세 먹여와지 쇼는 돈을 다 뒤강에 저기 와래 대 먹여와지 파관에라 세계 이슈로 친구가 시키때 저쪽으로 가티라 같이 가네.
So ethics helps us to abandon going into the direction of what is negative and to go into the direction of what is wholesome. We'll find that many of these disturbances that we have in our mind, the regrets and so forth, these are due to previous negative activities. So if we abide in ethics, it'll be more easy to keep the mind peaceful.
어따때 리때 못해 들어와 되레스. 단이 빠띵에 저거 라바 스네 라바 때 뭐지 그러와서.
And so that's like the training in ethics is like having a stable body. And then the next one of the three higher trainings is training in concentration. Training in concentration is compared to the hand.
다 거의 요다티 되게 신하고 질 빼자고 야레스. 내가 티가텔라.
And for this example, we think about the problems of samsara, of cyclic existence, as being like a poison tree or bush.
다 쫑이는 그게 제케테스레스 따레 들어왔어. 따레 때 싫어가 라바 들어와 되레스.
And of course, the main thing that is going to let us cut down that bush so that it no longer troubles us is the axe that is wielded in the hand. And that axe is the last of these three trainings, which is training in higher wisdom.
어다 소주조데 되겠으나 다 강가 가로게 제 강가 셔바 강가 로는 가로서 다 싫어비도 보시 위된디 사다 할레비 사치 모레도스.
And that is why the Buddha said sort of very explicitly that all of the dharmas I have spoken are to be in aid of bringing forth wisdom, for the purpose of bringing forth wisdom.
어다 되네서 제소아 아니 어다 되래 다 되지 않는 사수야 되네 류기치도 뚜비치에서는 로라바서 그녀래 때라 뚜비치세요야레스.
And so we talked about the dharma of scripture and the dharma of realization. We mentioned what the dharma of scripture was. The dharma of realization, we could say, is the actualization of these three higher trainings in ethics, concentration, and wisdom.
시부터 봐서 순거야 레어로 왔어. 다 빼나면 야 lumba 가와이나 lumba 텔라스 야 그게 치비도 보지 요도 이나요. 아니 소설 세가 놀면 되나? 소설 갈라쳐 봐레스.
Right, so and the holy beings have said that even if we abide in a land where the Dharma is well established, where the Dharma is widely available, if we don't use it, apply it to our mind to bring forth that Dharma of realization, we won't profit from it fully.
어때야때도 데리레어로 야 비스야 데모로 왔어. 어페나 lumba 텔라타나 사야도 투야 강가면 소설을 요나. 어다 야 소설 갈라쳐 봐도 보지레스. 시토를 사야도 투야 강에 매바 이나요.
Yeah,
소설 요나 네 테나 갈라쳐 봐도 왔어. 강에도 요나.
Sorry. So kala dang sorry. So kala dang tunya yusa dena so kala menana pentopment. So then, just like if you are a person who abides in a land of plenty where people have enough to eat and drink, but you are in poverty and are not able to get enough food, you do not benefit from that prosperity.
다 대도 가르세요. 소속 그게 미자 강가사 이네 자치 뭐 얘는 여보지는 그거는 소속 세계 놀을 예대되지 그러 왔습니다.
So the point here is that if you really cherish that we call the I or that we call the self, and you care about your own welfare, it makes sense that we will pay attention to this internal practice of developing our positive mental qualities.
어다 멜로 동버티가 손지가 동비친 전부 멜로 다 동비치텔라요 뭐야 발에 다 손지 생비치 바 되지로 왔어.
So this particular prayer at the top of page 7, its outline is called Retaining the Holy Dharma. Specifically here we are talking about retaining the Dharma of the Bodhisattva vehicle, the Mahayana Dharma.
다 그냥 소속은 전부 좀 맞아. 진이바티가 멜로 조제셔봐 끊어 놓아시 예라요 봐. 알았어. 로지 빠서나 내가 지원 놓은 거로 와 통용 거로 와서 대노지 예라요 대도 봐쇼.
So illuminate everywhere the teachings awaken. This means that not only do we want to bring forth the genuine Dharma within our own mind, but in fact we want to be able to bring the Dharma to others. So that is what is meant by illuminate everywhere.
다 쇼지 셈비셔와 쇼바도 니지게 내서 다 야트니 내서 뭐지 야로 왔어. 다시 쇼지 셈바 쇼지 셈비 녀레진 링와 예서셔와 간지스 거거래. 세계선은 또 간지스 거거래. 리기셔로 간지스 거거래. 드디게 내서 때 강가로 뭐jel은 제시 잡아텔라. 녀로도 놓아셔바스.
So to illuminate everywhere the teachings, we could say that this means in terms of the bodhisattva practices which bring forth love and compassion. The bodhisattva practices which help us to train our body, speech, and mind, which guide our thoughts to what is wholesome, which make our behavior and conduct what is wholesome. When we are able to explain all or part of this to beings, then we are illuminating everywhere the teachings that awaken.
근데 가치주 대 밀어던 노아샤바 가치 보레스 가레스. 지데 게제시엔들 안줄로.
Yeah.
노아시에서와.
Yeah.
지데 미글로. 밀
Mila.
노아샤바 가치 보레스.
Ale, kari, chu.
저지세베
And so not only do we want to speak the words of the teachings that go into the ears of the Bodhisattva, but ideally one is also able to bring forth an appearance to the eyes to benefit sentient beings. Ale. And so whose job is that? It is mainly the job of the person who explains the Dharma. Didn't meet Kandistrogyures. Sorry, missed that. So yeah, so what is meant here? It was like a little bit esoteric, but now I get it. So what is meant here is that the person who speaks the Dharma, right, their conduct should be pleasing. The way that they hold themselves should be subdued and pleasing, and in this way they can manifest an appearance which benefits the eyes of the sentient beings. And that's actually the tough one, because saying nice words about how it should be, that's the easy part, right? Manifesting in the way in accordance with those words, that's a little more difficult. So actually one who speaks the Dharma, they have a lot of things to consider and to be concerned about, really. And so then to practice ardently in all future eons, right? That's the task of all of us. And to embody the realizations of the bodhisattvas. Go again. I'm sorry, but I am but I am not loving this translation. Yeah. So I'm just going to say it actually is not realizations. It's the activities of a bodhisattva. Yes, like I said, also bodhisattvas aren't supposed to complain to people. I'm sorry, but if the words of how it's translated here don't match with what Geshe is explaining, people are going to be like, what the heck is going on, right? So I have to tell you that, unfortunately. Oh, listen. Yes, So embody the conduct of the bodhisattva means what? It means our own trainings in the 6 paramitas. And as we strive to engage in the bodhisattva practice, what's going to happen is we're going to encounter a lot of obstacles. So when we talk about obstacles, those are discordant conditions. So there can be discordant conditions that are particular to ourselves and discordant conditions of the environment that we inhabit. And the common obstacle that affects not just us but all beings, so that's called the environmental obstacle, this is the self-cherishing attitude. The self-concerned attitude. And then, of course, reinforcing that self-cherishing attitude is the ignorance grasping at the self. And then the specific obstacles are the obstacles that manifest to us personally to block particular practices. So for example, if one wants to practice generosity, then miserliness comes forth. Listen. And similarly, if we practice ethics, faulty conduct is the obstacle that prevents us from that.
다 제반년에 시비가 다 미야 요 다 그게 받지 저때 컨트롤 거기서 그냥 시다에서
And in terms of patience, the main obstacle to that is like anger, right?
하고서 다 돼지 가세 더 그게 고차 가서 계정 모시에 사서 고차 때문에 되는 돼지면 일러버려 그래서
And so we need to wear the armor of perseverance so that those obstacles don't prevent the arising of those qualities. And that is what we mentioned last time in the previous verses about the armor. The
pena
bodhisattva's armor.
sonje semenole cheke so yena ta pege sena ge pege nyoda pachi shim ngo yo ai ta ta jimba pege lumo ja ke sele so na ine chene ka wo chene pa jimba to ya ne tse ge was ta ina ye tela ko so so 강해 지요나
Yeah.
오다 소소 세게 놀러네 고다 드링아 때야면 ngal ka 드르드르드나고 드르게 때에서지 좋아지고 그 아래
So Hakusum. So the bodhisattva also needs, how do I describe this? Geshe's almost describing it as like an awareness. So for example, if the bodhisattva is hindered by miserliness, and because of that, when he or she is trying to engage in giving, trying to engage in generosity, there's like a little bit of like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or a little bit of holding back. What the bodhisattva is supposed to do is recognize that within the mind and think, you know what, today I wasn't able to kind of practice that generosity fully, right? Because I was held back by that mind of miserliness.
당연히 지는 때 그래 되네 이나요 당하로 그들이 야 가르쳐 강해지 요나거나 된다 하고서 마스 콜 컨트롤 사야도 다든지 주요 말이야.
So the bodhisattva knows, like, I was supposed to kind of give in that way, but because of one or another reason, I wasn't able to do that.
그래서 다 긴다 말아 버게 어지자는 간도 컨트롤 놓서 요.
And similarly, the person who wants whatever we are giving, right? If they are pushing us and asking us for more, right? We want to avoid getting angry at them and so forth.
어다 돼지 수수 하고 그래서 와서 어다 가서 때도 어다 저기 와서 어다 다시 주의도 놀려 쪼레스.
So here, when we talk about the bodhisattva's conduct, mainly we are speaking about the 6 paramitas or perfections. And so now we come to the next one, which is the second paragraph on page 7, and we could call the outline here obtaining the inexhaustible treasury.
시바 토제 동요 코안에 세노 이시다는 마제니 타도 시라 균즈노 다도 예티 근지 마제 제던저르스.
While circling through all states of existence, may I become an endless treasure of good qualities, skillful means, wisdom, samadhi, and liberating stabilizations, gathering limitless, pristine wisdom and positive potential.
다 마로서 이노 토스제네만 남에 바도 룸에 바 코사 코니 거기 알아봤어.
나서 양시 코로.
토스제네만 남에 바다.
남에 봐.
토스제 시제 즈메콘.
네, 로소.
토쇼데로와.
로소.
이네만 남에.
야.
바든 가로서 거라 자네 로야 되라.
So circling through the states of existence, this means circling through the peak of samsara, right, which is the formless realm, celestial beings or devas, all the way down to the Avicii hell without respite. High and low, we remain circling through cyclic existence.
다 소리도 저기 세바 소리는 소제다. 젠지대 저거요 아이자.
Yeah.
멜로도 게일레라 되는 거로서 로요 아레스.
But the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, when they enter samsara, it is not like this. They enter samsara due to prayers and aspirations to appear in particular realms to benefit those sentient beings. So we see a big difference here, right? The ordinary sentient being is compelled into this various states of existence without freedom. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they choose with complete freedom to appear in those places to bring benefit to those sentient beings. Ale, palsu droya kewa soso kushida bo droya di tubia di tingenzen la. And so it is said that the Bodhisattvas, for example, their ability to appear at will in those specific places arises from a special kind of concentration. Gathering limitless, so also the order here. So we go to the last line of the 4. Gathering limitless, pristine wisdom, and positive potential, this is really the two collections, right? It's saying that we are practicing the collection of merit and wisdom.
他在下修班尼修呀，下修班尼东西是哇是，他下要把给我这里跑下班了修班尼的个个的哇是。
And so this merit and wisdom, they are connected to the practices of method and wisdom, which, as we know from that famous analogy, these are like the two wings of the bird, which allow the bird to fly to the shore of liberation.
这个的哇是，他先弄个错，这个俺说呢，如得几个东吧，也得几个东吧，是俺说大家每年啊嘞。
So when we think about these two collections, we can think of them from the perspective of the objects of attainment. We can think of the Dharmakaya, the truth body, through which we achieve our own welfare, and the Rupakaya, or the form body, through which we achieve the welfare of others.
他先弄个错，这个等你做，等你呀，也得几个东吧，这样的那个情况嘞。
And the method practices, which allow us to build up the collection of merit, these are the primary cause of the Rupakaya, the form body through which one benefits others. And the practice of exalted wisdom, we know that it is through this wisdom that we are able to completely purify our own mind. So this wisdom is said to be the main cause of the Dharmakaya, the truth body, through which we achieve our own complete welfare. So then skillful means wisdom, samadhi, and liberating stabilization. So the stabilization here is that concentration which allows us to bring forth method, wisdom, and so forth to perfectly develop our positive mental qualities. And so, of course, we make the prayer that if we are able to be able to perfect and actualize these in this lifetime, and if not, to continuously, from lifetime to lifetime, work towards developing these qualities. And so in this way, we have covered 10 of the 16 prayers of this section. And so to kind of reinforce and have these prayers be actualized in a stable way, we should turn to the teachings on wisdom. So we'll talk a little bit about the text in praise of dependent arising. Tenjingjewa chungwetsu gawa dani majupar tongwa di kyugilu jita kudu chupar news. Yes. So we are on the 10th verse. The way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? So we want to think about the points that are being presented here in kind of like a stable, accessible way, right? A stable, accessible way so that we can come forth with some kind of understanding. So when we say that dependent arising and dependent origination are important and that we need to study it, what is the reason for that? It goes back to all of us seeing our own welfare as important. And if we really see our welfare as important, then we want to be able to achieve liberation from samsara. Why is this? Because we know that within samsara, even in the higher realms, the celestial realms of the devas or the realms of human beings, if we're able to enjoy a relatively happy life, as we come to the end of that lifespan, there will be suffering. We will face difficulty. And this samsara, which we described as being like a wheel going to the heights of samsara, to the devas of the formless realm, to the depths of the Avicii hells, and so forth. What keeps us circling through all of these existence is the king-like ignorance grasping at the self.
곧 잡아들래. 로와 단자 마리바디 잡아들래. 텔로 로바치게 롱진즈레 다 뭐요 하래서 단데 저 공도 나저 다도 가가 기어버려 되나.
And so ignorance grasping at the self, we posited it as being like the king, and then it has all of the branch afflictions which are reinforcing it: self-cherishing, attachment, pride, jealousy, anger, and so forth.
그래서 다 던지지 이자 다 텔로 퍼게 내가 제게 다 잡아라고 돼. 다 집어라 와서 콜 잡아라고 돼. 오버라 뭐요나. 어때 매워서 그 싫어라 잡아라고 돼. 오버라고 뭐요 하래서.
And so, if we think about this structure of that which we want to get rid of, the ignorance grasping at the self being like the king, and all of the other branch afflictions being like the ministers, then we understand that that which allows us to defeat ignorance, wisdom, is also like a king. And within wisdom, there are many servants and ministers which allow it to accomplish its aims.
다 던지지 이자 리바 뭐 먹는 리바 용주고 눈에 다 리바 잡어 싫어 잡어라고 돼. 땡주도 싫어.
And it is said that the king of reasoning, which we could almost say is like the most pristine, king-like wisdom, is the wisdom that determines or that discerns dependent arising.
그래서 다 리바 강가로 대다 코천려와 렘비라레스.
So all of the reasonings,
강가.
all of the reasonings, all of the wisdom we develop, right? Its culmination is in this wisdom penetrating dependent origination. So within the word for dependent arising, actually, or dependent origination, we have two words in English too. So there's the ten, which is the dependent, and the chung, or the drel, which is the arising or origination. So to understand how this unfolds, we need to think of the way that ignorance expresses itself. Ignorance expresses itself with two extreme views: the view of extreme existence and the view of annihilation, sometimes translated as nihilism. So these minds are described as it's like choksu lumwa. So lumwa has the idea of like tripping or falling over. So these mistaken views cause us to fall over. So the first of these is falling down to the extreme of existence. And this extreme of existence is telling us that things are So those are the views of inherent existence, true existence, thinking that things exist from their own side, that there is a true self of persons and phenomena. These are the extreme views of existence. Yes, and so that stops the first part of dependent origination. It stops us from seeing things that things arise dependently, the ten. So, dependent upon, arising from, related to, these are all one meaning. If we say that any phenomena whatsoever arises dependently, arises connected with, what does that tell us? So if something arises dependently, we understand this corrects the view, the mistaken view, that it is independent, that it arises independently. And so the reasoning tells us ignorance you are incorrect, right? Because you are saying that things exist from their own side. They exist inherently. If they existed inherently, they would have to exist independently. And this is not the case, because everything is dependent upon causes. And we could say that every phenomena, it is empty of arising or existing independently. We could probably express it a little bit like that. Yeah. Yep. So that's dependent origination. When we say dependent arising, that means that whatever arises, it necessarily has to arise in dependence or arise in connection with something else. And so whatever arises in dependence upon something else, that is a functioning thing. Oh, right. And so this corrects the view that there is nothing that exists at all, right? Which is the extreme of annihilation. So we see that we have corrected those two extremes that we could fall into, the extreme of existence and the extreme of annihilation. So dependent arising, dependent origination, these are so precious because when it is comprehended in the same moment, it can defeat both mistaken views of existence and annihilation. So it is said that actually it is not easy to determine this, and the full extent is only comprehended when we understand the Majjhimika Prasangika view, the middle way consequence school. But to understand that, we need to go through different levels of understanding, right? From the Sutra school, from the Vaibhashika school, to the mind-only school, to the middle way school.
And
in terms of the Prasangika view being supreme, this is not said in a haughty way. Remember that the glorious Chandrakirti said, "Here I will discern the final view." And it is not that I want to undermine these other understandings, but as a natural consequence of explaining what is, they will be shown mistaken. Ale, ¿dónde me ves? Ale, corrélate. So when Lama Tsongkhapa first comprehended dependent arising, dependent origination, he felt a joy manifest within himself, a joy that was stable and more profound than what he had experienced before. And when he experienced that joy, he wrote a praise to that understanding of dependent arising, which is this prayer. So we should also feel joyful studying it. Donangshin, yeah. Chugi Nongla? Yeah. And so we want this to help us transform our mind. The Lamas often say, don't be like a stone in water. We're like in this water or nectar of a dharma, but if we're hard like a stone, we won't absorb any of it. So if we understand that the stuff that we're hearing is to help us transform our mind into something positive, that should be something that brings forth some happiness, brings forth some joy. And so in terms of what we practice to get rid of, if we were to distill this to the essence, we could say that we are striving to be rid of true sufferings and true origins. So if we were to expand on this a little bit, we could expand this into two sets of 6. which will bring us to a discussion of the 12 links of dependent arising.
땅으로서 로아를 주고 생제 요소 다 중이 될 거봐. 거라지는 강가 그냥 가디는 거할 때 대한테 매봐서 그때 땜주도 비시라서 매봐서 더 요래스.
And what will allow us to stop the sort of continuous cycle of these 12 links of dependent arising that keep us in samsara is the wisdom penetrating dependent arising.
다 야 되게 시도 마선 짜와리 매봐서 그때 땜주도 비시라더래도 아스타테 그냥 그때 소소소 로주도 요래전 계속 첨부해스.
And we can think of this as what is the actual axe which allows us to cut down this poisonous tree of the afflictions which is hindering us, and that is the wisdom penetrating dependent arising.
다 들이죠 아주 땐제 땐 유세 자치 지선 진이세다 땐디와 이면에서 니가 좀 하고 그거디와.
And so today we talked a little bit about the meaning of tenjung and tenjel, dependent arising and dependent origination, and the two things that they accomplish. So that is something to keep in mind.
다 뒤에 탄이 매워서도 간데 이면에 쓰고 샤소나. 그러니까 안가 레라고 와야지 땐디 하레스.
When we understand how dependent arising allows us to defeat the two extreme views, the extreme of existence and the extreme of annihilation, then we are well on our way to understanding.
다시 맞다 한가와도는 맞아봐스.
And so
야 당기체 아
Ale.
요라시 줘야 말은 맞으르시네.
Gewa, oh yeah, so as contradictory or as unestablished, how can they comprehend your system?
대진 대왕주의 생각과 통계의 설에서는 노아레스.
So,
노마.
Nongba.
노예가 다시 아마로 지바 세자가
네.
또 대바시라 뭐.
So, contradictory is actually talking to Buddhists who are holding views other than the Prasangika one, right? So we're talking about other schools of Buddhist thought.
단체 도시라고 아마 단자와 걸어서 단계 지시 기대라와스. 다 아마로 지바 할레 아마 바레 자신 버레 되는 이나이키 시간을 로지지 요아레.
Ale, yeah. So within these different views, we talk about the Majjhimika being the highest, the Majjhimika Prasangika. And within the Majjhimika, there's another school, the Sautantrika, which is also a very profound understanding, but they are still holding to some element of true existence.
로지지 잡아 요아레. 저세 가레에서 땡데라와스. 걸어서 되게 연구야.
So their argument is there is an element of true existence because there is dependent arising. In other words, they use dependent arising to show that there is a measure of
다
existence.
배든가와 침못이 좋아서 그래스.
So that's a deep contradiction. That view is a deep contradiction. So that's what Tsongkhapa means here by contradictory.
대라 때니 아니 이게 땡주기 내서디하고 통통.
Because on the basis of holding on to that view, one will not be able to perceive things as they really are.
니바데 맞아봐. 세한테 싫어봐.
Yeah. So unestablished, this is pointing to non-Buddhist tenets holders, right? So holders of other philosophical traditions.
그래서 다 본바도 가와 여기도 나로서 강가로 땡주 걸어 알레 길레로 레기야 말was.
So in here, unestablished means that they don't accept that dependent arising or dependent origination is the underlying reality which allows the arising of objects.
그래서 대이자들은 뭐야 맞아봐. 세레오네 때지 알레 제세 많이 인조가 와서 뭐 동보대고 그거 길레 매서 맞아봐 줘.
Yes. And so therefore they are unestablished. And so to come to an understanding, right, you need to go through two steps. They can comprehend neither of these, so it is unestablished.
단에서 던지지고 보게 과대요. 이자 말이 봐. 침모지니 저 소소소 과기도 와. 대라 때네 저렇게 다 침모 땡주기 내서데 콘트 저 도금만 요 아버시 도금만 요.
So if they are holding something that is contradictory, or if they are holding the view itself as completely unestablished, they won't be able to understand it at all. So that's why Lama Tsongkhapa asked the question, how can they comprehend your system?
단에서 던지지 세상간도 다 시라도 가와 가라래 없는데 되네. 이나 알레 내서 때에서 해자 더 해도 가서 가서 말해.
So being able to bring forth the wisdom that realizes this, that is maybe something a little bit difficult, but even for us to come together and discuss it and listen to it today, we are very, very fortunate.
단에서 던지지 비자보 땡되게 때시 설레라고 말했어.
So remember, the king of reasonings, this teaching on dependent arising because it's the king of reasonings, it might not necessarily be the easiest thing to understand. So think then with an appreciation and a joyful mind, I'm going to try to study and practice the king of reasonings, the wisdom of dependent arising as much as possible. So thank you very much. We will pause here. We will recite the dedication prayers, and then those of you who need to go after the prayers, please do, but if you would like to hang around for questions afterwards, you are most welcome. Changju Semju Rinpoche Maje Panam Jejurchi Chewa Nyamba Mepa Yang Gone Kundu Pewa Shu Toni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Panam Jejurchi Chewa Nyamba 37. Jombe Pao Jidar Gyambada Kundu Sambo Deyon Dejende Deda Kungi Jesu Daloche Gewa Dida Tanje Rabdumo Desu Shibi Gyawa Tanje Ge Ngowa Gangla Chodo Ngabade Dagi Gewe Tsawa Digun Kyo Zambo Chuji Rabdu Ngowa Through the power of these merits that we have accumulated, may all of the conflicts and pandemics, diseases in the world be completely cleared away. May any 6 types of sentient beings possessing evil thoughts be able to clear away those unwholesome thoughts totally and only bring forth wholesome, beneficial thoughts. Because I need to engage in the practice of Dharma and bring forth the minds of love and compassion, may I have good physical and good mental health. May all obstacles to physical and mental health be cleared away. So perhaps we should take questions now. If anybody would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself.
I'll always ask a question. It's your
Yo, Lisa, I love how I can always count on you to ask a question. Go for it.
This is a great opportunity for me, actually, to ask a question. Anyways, I wanted to ask you, like, what happens, like, how do you, when your mind is gripped with anxiety, how do you move through it? Like how, when your mind is gripped with anxiety, like, you know, how do you use through it in the context of reasoning, you know, through like, to dependent arising and all that sort of thing? Like, how do you move through anxiety through the Dharma? That's my question. I know that's a big question.
Gotcha. No, I'm sure you'll get an interesting answer. Nanzo tsem halepe tsagi tsigi chadirwa, nanzo samsam netsu tes kalakabochik tu, tene netsu dela tene halepe tsagi tsigi semgi rangshin dapo chagiredwa, tsagi di gyune kandis drogores. Nanzo tsagi mepa soya perna che kandis pesha tangures. Tenjungi neso kandis pesha tangures. Tsagi di mepa soya.
Me ta ramba tombo te kadi na ka.
Mepa soya perna che. Okay. Loso, huh?
Listen.
Huh?
Ramba tombo te ta ti di ka la nganzo so ko poe. Ka so wa ra was ra mo de no ji wa was.
Yeah.
Ti se ti ke si o ta nga sa ga se den den ga le so ko ndu so na te so to ka chi mo chi les.
So actually the first step, Yolisa, is mindfulness, because if we can have like an observer, almost like a spy in our mind that is able to spot when that nervousness, when that anxiety first starts to come up, we can nip it in the bud by saying, aha, I see anxiety is coming up here, so I'm going to redouble my efforts to keep a calm mind.
Shi ji pe je to se ate gom ja ki bo ke ja ma ra was. No ji ga di na ka ze ta se poe se ta je zo ya ka chi mo chi ko yo res.
So we often talk about the factor of introspection, right? And we talk about introspection in the context of like meditation, calm abiding, and so forth. But actually, introspection is something we need in outside of the session in daily life as well, because introspection is able to spot those problems in the mind when they're first manifesting.
다 때레레 노래 소노 코로 보게 다 친 보게 요다 차원다 뭐 디세 지오나 강에 심어다 보시오 오 고용 저도 제 뭐지라 때네 지지보라 때네 용아 말아 와스.
But if we're sort of beyond that point and we're faced with a dilemma or with a situation that has already really disturbed us, then we want to step back and think this situation didn't just arrive randomly. And also, it didn't arise just from one cause, right? It arose from different causes and conditions coming together.
따또는 이제 와치 돈이라 소소 소한테 이제 와치 돈이라 쇼지 지볼 마다 와치 뭐지라 진짜 모두 간데는데 대파치 따토바이나 돈도 땡들로서 저완도야 되는 거야.
So, if we just shift our way of looking at it from seeing it as that thing that just kind of came up, and we see that actually this is something that arose from many causes and conditions. And it's also abiding partly due to my own way of viewing it, right? My own anxiety and projection behind it. If you're able to do that, what you might see is that actually the problem becomes less of a disturbance.
강에 코를 놓선 저와 또 맞다네. 소소 소선 저와지라 때네 소소소래래 자이시 때네 요아스.
And so this way of thinking, right, even if it can't change the outer situation in the way that we might want it to, because we've changed our way of thinking about the situation, the mental disturbance is going to be much less.
당이 때야 지바래 간돌아 용이서 왔다 나와 뭐를 셀까 야 칼렌더 같이 뭐지 또 손도 또 찔라데 어까 그거 만에 대해서는 또 그냥 간데라고 소소.
So Geshe was just saying from his own experience, like he's seen this many times where he gets upset about something, and like he might even be upset about it for a couple of months, right? It might be a disturbance that's there for a while, but then he'll read something or he'll think about a teaching and he'll just say, gosh, it was so foolish. If I had just applied this different way of looking at it or thinking about it, so much of the disturbance of that would have been easily cleared away.
리치를 때는 리그 강에를 세 강에 저한도 내가 뭐야 와서 뭐 디아르세.
And in many ways, right, a lot of people say it's like actually easier to fix a physical discomfort than to fix the discomfort within the mind, right? It can be more of a challenge.
리그만라고 지나 그 디세리오 코로 만도 그거 아마도
Yeah, but we also know that it's a gradual process for body and mind, right? If we have a deep cut or a sore on our body and we cover it with a plaster, we know it's not just going to go away immediately, right? It's going to take some time to heal. So the same way with shifting our thinking.
세 코로 리그라가 제가 아이선도 또 지고 레라고 좋아도 다 주아레스.
But it said that in some ways maybe the mind is a bit easier than the body from the perspective of the mind rides together with the wind, and because wind is in the nature of movement, mental change is more possible. So hopefully, Yolisa, that touched on your question.
Yes, that was very helpful. And one other follow-up question I have is, like, what are some of the cognitive distortions that, you know, that we have a tendency to have that are a hindrance to us changing our perspective and our projections?
Nanso di tongtang di jebujaya, roa. Nanso di lungwa chik so kareres rwa nanso di kandesla kare jenda samlo tang tang ke mitubya gi barche sochi kandesres. Can you rephrase that, Yolisa?
Okay, like cognitive distortions, the way that, like what are some of the things that the distortions in our mind that prevent us from changing our projections, like that are hindrances, that are barriers? I guess they would be just, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Example of a cognitive distortion.
Okay, so cognitive distortion would be something like looking at something falsely.
Right, okay, yes, no, I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
looking
you.
at something falsely.
I got you. Nanso kandesla gre netsu di rwa chok jendag ne tago gire dwa rwa dene rangshin gi kange mego gidus. Ine nanso di kandesla gre tongtang norwa di rwa perna cheta dang tata di kandes no gyores nanso netsu jendag samlo tang tang kia.
Me soso de jisengine to tata re mena yo te su jane de na tata to cheta no.
Loso.
So no da sono to yara was.
Yeah.
Te azu jane de jitse so ya yara was.
Le loso.
Ti jitse kanga re menduna tata to cheta no yara was.
Yeah. Ne di morangi chu mare.
Ti res ki son zi yara was. Ti son zi tela. Ani azu jane te jitse de garo zu de na. Te ngi ne re mena.
So we have to just have the awareness. What happens is if we see that the way of thinking about the thing is not in accordance with the reality, but we persist in following that way of thinking because of habituation or whatever, then we're going to fall into even more extremes of existence and to annihilation. Actually, what keeps us spinning within samsara with difficult situations and whatever is a false reasoning. We're thinking of reasonings why things exist in extreme rather than using reasonings to see why they don't. And that's what hinders us.
Thank you so very much. I guess one of my prayers to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is always show me the truth directly.
Yeah, go jangchu sempa dang sangye dinsunga ngunenetsu sepo tong tubyogi nubatero chesla gire duas. That's a good prayer of aspiration and one that we should all be contemplating. Yeah, and today in fact we were praying for that in part. We were praying for being able to develop that wisdom, being able to develop that samadhi concentration and so forth.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have... Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, Yolisa. Does anyone else have a question? Dave's just checking the Facebook. No? Okay. Chiyomandugi. Oh, Chiyomandu. Oh.
Yeah,
so Geshe said that if there's no questions, then normally he would tell a story, but the story that he wants to tell is a long one, so he's going to save it for next time. So as much as possible, please everybody try to remember the topics that we've covered up to this point, right? Don't forget all the topics of the previous lessons. So thank you very much. We will end it here. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Venerable Hedra. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right there,